What we're going to focus on today is the journey that Common Core is going to take us on the path of assessment. So what I'd like to start out with is, this is a quote directly out of the Common Core State Standards, and I'm not reading it word for word, but really wanted to focus on this quote because it's really talking about that the Common Core standards are not just a new set of standards. It's really about doing business in a different way, and that's kind of been a little bit of a theme of today as we've been talking. It's about developing that car for our kids. And as Anthony mentioned this morning, it's really about getting to that level 4 and that level 5 where our students are able to be successful in the real world in predictable and non-predictable situations, because that's what we really want them to be able to do to be successful citizens, which is going to help everyone out. So, wanted to start out with a little bit of statistics here on Lexile scores. Has anybody ever seen a chart about Lexile scoring and all that before? So some of you may have seen this, so if you know this, don't let the cat out of the bag. But they did an analysis of high school literature books. They basically collected them all up and they said, okay, let's see what the average Lexile score is of our high school literature books. And this is where it fell. You can see the middle here, it's kind of where we fell. And just at glancing at that, that might be good, that might be bad. It's pretty hard to determine when we're not looking at other things. So they also did an analysis of college-level literature books. Because we want to see probably an increase in that Lexile scoring, but we'd also want to see that in high school we're preparing our kids for being able to read in college. And here we have our college. The next step they did is they took all the textbooks in the high schools. And these are the textbooks beyond the literature. So these are our sciences, our social studies, and all of those things. These are the subjects where technically, quote unquote, we're not really having to teach reading, right? This is just our content area courses. And this is what we find. We can see that that level is actually higher than what's required in their high school literature classes that they're taking. We take another collection and we say, okay, well, we want to compare this to all the content area books that our kids are going to have to read in college. Are we preparing them for what they need to read when they get to college? And we see that that's quite a raise for them. So we really have to be looking at the type of materials that we're covering with our kids, what we're assessing, is the information that we're getting, giving us the right information to see if our kids are college and career ready. So we talk about college and career ready. Well, traditionally, another route for career has been military. That will probably continue to be a route for many of our students, whether they go to college and then go on to military or whether they enter right into military. So they grabbed military training books, things that are required for enlisted members of the military to read. So our enlisted members, meaning people that did not go to college but went straight from high school or had a GED and went into the military. And here's their Lexiles. See, it's a really narrow band because there's a lot of functional text and things that they're reading there, so there's not quite the span we see in some of the other areas. But we can see this is quite a bit higher than what we're requiring in high schools. And they're starting to see this in the placement tests for people going into the military. That bar has been raised and raised on their tests, and they're starting to see more and more students that are not able to get into the military, where that was they were hoping was going to be their course of action, and now they can't get in. So then we said, okay, forget all of that. Let's just see if are our kids ready for their personal, just being, living in the world. Are they ready to fill out applications and read product manuals and do all the things we as adults do? So they took a compilation of all the materials that we have to read as adults and be able to process. And here's those Lexiles. So let's look at entry-level occupations. So going into the workforce, these are the things that are typical we want our students to be able to do if they were entering the workforce. And here's that. And last but not least, we probably want to look at SAT, ACT, and AP classes and see what that content area looks like. And here's what we see. So you can see, if we're really going to prepare our kids for the world that they have to face, whatever path that's going to be, whether it's college, whether it's military, whether it's career, we really have to pay attention to how we're teaching our kids, and most importantly, how we're assessing that learning to making sure we're getting to the levels we need, which is what today is all about.
This is a great graph. I'm thinking ahead to try to explain this to a parent or a group of parents. Would it be fair to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, just based on this type of presentation, that when it comes to the personal use bar, let's say that's filling out a credit card application, a real life practical, or does that demonstrate that the competency for lack of a better word, to fill out a credit card application is higher than a high school textbook?
I wouldn't put one personal thing on it, but a compilation of all those things that they have to do. Yeah.
Anticipating a question from
Right.
the parent.
Exactly. If we're just looking at Lexile scores, and we go into reading in a second and we talk about assessing reading, Lexile is a very quantitative way of looking at that. We're going to also talk about some qualitative things that we want to look at, so it's not just a one-and-one. But yeah, this is some sobering evidence just to say we've got to grab more of this and we've got to bring it down to our kids and make sure that they're ready for the world we face in. And that's a lot of what you see with Common Core when we start talking about the whole strand of learning to read in the content area strand. When you start looking at the functional text strand and the increase in informational text that starts to take place all the way from 3rd grade on, where it goes from that balance of 50% and 50% all the way to 80% and 20%, which is our ultimate goal by 12th grade. Okay, so we're going to talk about ELA first. There's been some shifts in ELA. These are a little bit instructional, but you're going to see how they apply to assessment as well. So the first one is balancing informational and literary text, and we're going to go through each of these individually. Building knowledge in the disciplines. The staircase of complexity, which is kind of one of those pieces we were just looking at. Text-based answers, and academic vocabulary. We've seen vocabulary pop up a few times today through conversation. So let's look at the first one, the shift in balancing literature and informational text. So many of you have probably seen this breakdown, but here's what it is recommended in the Common Core, and this is a big change for many of our teachers. Where we used to have about 80% traditionally and 20% fiction to nonfiction, we're starting to need to see that switch. And that comes from the results of things like those Lexile studies that we're looking at. So we're looking at around 4th grade of a balance of about 50-50, building all the way up to 12th grade at 70-30, and some even recommend beyond that. So our minimum balance is there. So what do we recommend if we're talking about this? We have to think about our curriculum mapping or our pacing guides a little bit differently than we have in the past. This goes for our ELA teachers. It comes with working together with our content area teachers as well. But we have to really map out the curriculum for the year, develop a quarterly plan, using informational text with literature, and this is key. The biggest shift for our teachers is going to be, and this includes in our assessments, we can't just say, I'm doing my fictional unit, now I'm doing my nonfiction unit. It's got to be all embedded, it's got to be planned through the course of the year, and we'll see that throughout the assessments as well. And you're not going to get there unless every single person in your building is considered a reading teacher. There's just no way around it. Literacy is king. We're going to talk about the importance of math in just a little bit, but even when it comes down to the math, some of the math examples I'm going to show you today, the amount of reading that is required for the new math tests is going to be much higher. Literacy is going to be it. So shift number 2, balancing knowledge in the disciplines. So what do we mean by that? Well, right now, as you just saw, there's been a big failure in jobs and college readiness. I think the statistic, and Anthony, you can help me out, that we saw, the most recent one, when we were just out in June at model schools, was something like 80% of our kids have to take some kind of remedial course when they enter college right now. That means they are not ready for their first level math and ELA class when they get there. And you saw some of the reasons for that in some of our quantitative material. Reading in a discipline is very different than reading literature. So when we're talking about assessments and preparing kids for answering questions on functional text, we have to prepare that. The way we're going to do think alouds is going to be very different than it's going to be in the realm of literature. Oh, thank you, Don. We've really got to go back to, and Anthony talked about this a little bit this morning, going back to fostering citizenship skills, things like debating, looking at different perspectives, knowing that we have to have different sources, and knowing that where a source of material comes from is going to be important in drawing inferences from that text. And you'll see that embedded in the assessment questions as well. Shift number 3, that staircase of complexity. So we're going to look at, they need to understand, teachers need to look at the quantitative and the qualitative measures of the reading passages. So we're not just saying, okay, if it's a Lexile of 800, it's perfect, but we also have to look at the range of what kids need to be able to read. What's going to draw them in and interest them? How are we going to make connections when they're reading some of these functional pieces to the things that they need to do in their everyday life? How are we going to make that relevant for them so so that they really learn that what we're learning is going to be critical for their future. And we're going to have to scaffold. These are all things we've heard of before, but it's going to go with assessment. You're going to see that some of the far-off examples of what kids are going to maybe have to do in these next generation assessments, which we're going to go over in a minute, we're really going to have to take these building block skills of A, learn to do interventions at a very early time, learning recovery type things, and build our kids to be able to independently think and work through these very complex problems. So here we go. These were the old Lexile ranges that used to be the base of our assessment. This is what the Common Core expectations are. And you can see that's going to be a big shift. Where does most of that come from? It comes from bringing in more of that informational and functional pieces of text. Shift 4. Text-based answers. In New York, you guys have had Part 2s for a long time. But really having kids dig in and explain how they got answers in math, how they got answers in ELA, where they found those answers, being able to back it up, being able to talk about other sources, these are all things that Common Core assessments are going to have to draw them into. So, only answered with reference to the task, ask students to focus on unique qualities of the text, so drawing out things that are different about one text versus another. You see a lot of comparison in the standards. Asking students to follow a logic, being able to draw an inference. Why did an author use this phraseology here? Why might the author have said this? What is the reason the author might have listed that? And we'll go over some examples here in just a minute. Shift 5, academic vocabulary. Common Core breaks it down into kind of 3 tiers. They no longer say we just have the words of everyday speech, which is always what we've been considered our grammar and our conventional type things that students have had to know. But they also talk about general academic words. These are where our prefixes, our suffixes, all of those things that our kids have generally had to learn in 6th grade and beyond, starting much younger. We're going to see those start to develop and be in place. Those are going to draw in from our content areas. And then our domain-specific words. So as we're studying about ecology, what are the words we need to know? And we need to make our kids responsible for those early on. And we'll see those in our assessments as well. So let's look in ELA how this scaffolds. And we're just going to pull out one example right now from informational text, K5. So here is the 3rd grade example. Compare and contrast the most important points and key details presented in 2 texts on the same topic. Sounds pretty difficult, but it sounds doable, right? We're talking about 3rd graders here, so they're going to have our 2 texts. They're going to be able to look out on the same topic, and they're going to compare and contrast. You can almost see Venn diagrams popping out here. You can see the kind of tools that you might be using. Here's how it builds into 4th grade. And now we see 5th grade. And this is the whole premise of the Common Core, both assessments and our instruction, is it's all about scaffolding. It's all about helping kids get to that highest level. Everything should be a build on. If we're asking kids in 3rd grade, what's a fact and opinion, it's going to look very different in 6th grade than it does in 3rd grade now. And this is how we'll build. Okay. I'd like to take just a minute, and if everybody could just read this for 1 second. I won't read it to you. I'm going to tell you, this is a sample out of the PARCC Consortium, a sample assessment from the 11th and 12th grade, what they're proposing for a Common Core assessment. That is the STEM. Here is the task that students are supposedly going to be given to answer this. Decides which text you want to include and which order. You must include at least 6 texts. Text can include books, poems, songs, short stories, essays, photographs, articles, films, television shows, or internet media. The 6 texts must represent at least 2 different perspectives and must include at least 2 different types of text. You're going to identify and discuss different perspectives on the American dream based on the 6 texts you selected, and write a short paragraph about each text in which you make clear why you have included it and how it is related to the text in your anthology. How many of you feel really confident that your 11th and 12th graders, if you handed this to them tomorrow, they'd be really able to do that, right? So, this is what they're talking about building to. These are the types of things that they're talking about our assessments going to. this is probably not the reality of where we are right now. So let's take a look at what that bridge looks like from here to where we were to where we are. So what I've done, I pulled out an example. And this example is from the 3rd grade, from the past ELA assessment, not the very past one, but before when they were releasing our item. And this is from Information and Understanding, Read and Understand Written Directions, 3rd grade level. And here's the question. In which step of the experiment do you add salt? Okay, you can imagine the article up there. The kids have to go up, find the step, where did I add the salt, and pick their answer choice. Okay? This was a very missed question in New York by our 3rd graders. This was a pretty high level rigor question, actually. Okay, once again, probably a lot to do with the type of text it was. Reading directions is something that's hard. It's taught in a totally different way. It's something that we often didn't incorporate as much as we could have into the classroom. I want to look at what the Common Core assessment possibly for this year might look like. This is 3RI3. Describe the relationship between a series of historical events, scientific ideas, concepts, or steps in a technical procedure and a text using language that pertains to time, sequence, and cause and effect. Here's the question. Why does the 4th step have you paint the outside of the ball? Write your answer on the line below. Make sure to include details from the directions to support your answer. So you can see, they're not only just going in and picking out that step, they're now going in, picking out that step, and from that step, they're drawing an inference based on what the text said, taking that really to a much higher level order of rigor. Let's look at another one, more upper grade, 7th grade. 7th grade literary response and expression. Identify the author's point of view, such as first person narrator and omniscient narrator. This passage is told from what point of view? And I have a list there. How many of your kids have ever struggled, those of you that have looked at data in 7th and 8th grade, struggled with point of view? It's a tough concept for kids sometimes. Just getting the I down and saying that's first person, usually pretty easy. Once we start getting past that, it's a little more difficult a concept. I want you to notice that this is a 6th grade example from the Common Core. So this is a grade level below what we have here. Explain how the author develops the point of view of a narrator or speaker in a text. Here's an example question. Which line from the passage illustrates knowledge that the narrator has that the other characters do not have in the story? I'm not just identifying now whose point of view it's told from. I have to draw an inference from the point of view and say, okay, if I know if the author has this point of view, what is the thing he knows that everyone else doesn't know? It's a way of looking at things differently. Is it going to prepare our kids more for levels 4 and 5? Yes. Are all the standards going to be harder for our kids? No. There's some areas where I think it stays pretty stagnant or it's fairly similar to what we've seen in the past. But there are some huge differences between what we have and what we're headed toward.
Can you just go back to that example for grades 11 and 12?
Yeah.
Because I think this is very telling. This is a big challenge.
Yes.
It's not so much that the student would or would not be able to physically write to meet the standard of the writing, but the onus is really now on the teacher for him or her to have introduced the student to those texts.
Right.
So I dare say in the past, in junior and senior year, the student may not have had that exposure, but may have had the physical capability of writing at that level.
Right, and remembering that it's on the student to go out and actually research and find these things that are going to support their argument and those perspectives. So we don't only have to teach our kids the basics of these are the different genre things, but now how do I go out there and find good examples of that? And then how do I back that up with my writing? It's very, very high order. Okay, so let's head into math. Here's our 4 shifts in math. Focus, probably the biggest one you guys are all aware of. So we're looking at things a little bit differently. We're not covering as many standards in a grade level now. We're covering a shorter band, but we're digging deeper. And you're going to really see that when we get into assessment. 2 is the coherence piece. So everything is now a progression. The whole goal of Common Core, especially with math, was to be able to build a common foundation where we're all saying, okay, this sequentially will come close to after this. Not that everything has to be taught the exact same way. That would go against everything on differentiation, but that there's a progression of learning that should take place, and these skills are probably learned prior to these skills being able to be mastered. So here is a chart, and I thought this chart was really interesting to look at. This is the top placement in top achieving countries. So they looked at the top achieving countries, so they considered the A+ in mathematics. And if the box is red, that means that 100% of the top performing countries place that in their curriculum for that grade level. If the box is the dark black, that meant 85% of the countries placed that of importance in their curriculum, so they covered it. And then the light gray was 67%. So you notice there's kind of a little bit of a spread. There's some differentiation that takes place here, but also that there's some kind of tight bands that happen here. You can see, whole numbers and meaning. We've got like a band there. There were some ideas. Keep this in mind. This is currently before Common Core adopted. This is the United States. If it's in red, 100% of states placed it in their pacing or their standards for that grade level curriculum. Black, same thing, 85%. Light gray, 67%. Notice any differences? I'll jump back. Kind of weren't all on the same page as far as like where the progression was going to be and what would be covered and where the orders of importance are. And you can see in some grade levels, like I think geometry transformations are a good example. We've got it going on all the way across the board. It's kind of everywhere. Now let's look at Common Core. You can see the goal there. Kind of tighten it up, look at things a little bit more coherently, more put together with introduction pieces there at different grades. So shift 3. Before in math, we spent a lot of time talking about fluency in math, fluency of our basic facts. That was a big one. Then we talked about problem solving. But we've added a piece here. It's not only just that fluency procedural skill, but really deeply understanding, meaning I'm going to have to explain why this works. How many of you know how to multiply a fraction by a fraction? How many of you know how to explain why that works the way it does? I know Holly does because she wrote a lesson on it, but I didn't see a lot of other hands confidently going up. It's really getting kids to understand why what we do, why it works, and what does it mean, and then being able to apply that to those real world situations. So, which leads us into deeper understanding, really exploring math, having the time to be able to dig in and not just say, okay, we got that, we got fractions covered, now we gotta go tell time, now we gotta learn money, now we've gotta do all these things. Being able to spend more time making connections with our kids, having that build up. And that sometimes there's more than one solution to the problems that we're gonna see. So areas of change for assessment instruction. Here's the recommended largest changes based on what Common Core had and the state of New York had before. Here's where the largest changes are taking place. Not that there aren't changes in other areas, but you can kind of see where there's going to be some large, like, oh my goodnesses. And at the high school, if we took that chart down, you would see statistics and probability would be very high. There's a whole lot more statistics in the curriculum now in math at the high school level than there ever have been before. If you have this paper at your desk, I'd like to give you about a minute to read it, okay? This is actually, it's a joint release from Smarter Balance and PARCC. This is a sample assessment STEM. This is, first of all, just so you know, a math question. What's the first thing you notice right away? We haven't even gone to the problem yet, but what's the first thing you notice right away? Oh my gosh. Can you imagine right now? I can already hear the teacher saying, my kids cannot possibly read this. Now let's get to the problem. Compare Mrs. Johnson's gas bills from January 2007 and January 2008. Estimate her savings due to the new installation and ceiling and explain your reasoning. Decide whether the insulation and the ceiling work on Mrs. Johnson's house was cost effective and provide evidence for your decision. Design a brochure to advertise this product. Okay, anybody want to guess the grade? Now everybody's really scared, right? This is a 7th grade math assessment released by PARCC and Smarter Balance. Yeah. Exactly. Right. And are we going to get there overnight? Is this something we should spring on all of our kids in 2014, 2015, whenever PARCC gets it out? No, we've got to build there. So let's talk about how we're going to be building. So here's an example, past New York assessment again, 4th grade. Find the area of a rectangle by counting the number of squares needed to cover the rectangle. And you can see there we got Mrs. Garcia. If you can't read that, she's got 3 rugs. You have to say which of the 2 rugs have the same perimeter, and then you have to find the area in square units of that. Okay? That's a pretty tough question. That was once again something that I think we found over and over again on identification charts from our clients was something that kids struggled with. Once again, I tried to find a 4th grade example, couldn't find one. This is the 3rd grade example. It's a grade level below. Use tiling to show in a concrete case the area of a rectangle with whole number side lengths that B and C is the sum of A times B plus A plus C. Use area models to represent the distributive property in mathematical reasoning. First of all, that's a mouthful. So once everybody understands what that means, let's look at our sample question. Shane has 2 rectangular boards to use for the base of his stage. The figures below show the sides of the 2 boards. Shane plans to push the 2 boards together to build a stage. Draw a picture that shows the 2 boards pushed together. Make sure to label the lengths of the side of the figure. And what is the total area of the 2 boards pushed together? That is a question that our kids could be facing this year. And I can tell you it's going to be very similar to what they'll see on benchmarks that we are giving. Because we have to get our kids ready for this. This is what it's going to look like.
And I've seen a problem of that nature addressed in like woodshop.
Right.
Where they would get together and build constructive measures.
Yep. Remember we talked about making it concrete for our kids? If I was a 3rd grade teacher, I want to see this soon. I want to take this test in September, see what this is going to look like, and I want to start planning this unit now. Now the good news for me as a 3rd grade teacher is I don't have as many things I used to have to cover. The bad news is I'm going to have to really get my kids to really understand area. It's no longer going to be, okay, I can teach the strategy of counting the squares and they can get the right answer. Okay, one more. Percent problem. So this is an 8th grade, apply percent to tax, percent increase. There's kind of a list there. Here's our old New York example. Rowan raised $640 in a charity walk last year. This year he raised 15% more than he raised last year. How much money did Rowan raise this year? Show your work. Once again, that was a kind of a tough one for our kids. Here's what it looks like in 7th grade. Use proportional relationships to solve multi-step ratio and percent problems. Julie sees a jacket that costs $32 before the sale. Oh wait, I should say, in a sale, all the prices are reduced by 25%. Julie sees a jacket that costs $32 before the sale. How much does it cost in the sale? So I'm going to show my calculations there. In the 2nd week of the sale, the prices are reduced by 25% of the previous week's price. In the 3rd week, the prices are again reduced by 25%. And then the 4th week, we're again reduced by 25%. Julie thinks that this will mean the prices will be reduced to $0 after the 4 reductions because 4 times 25 equals 100. Explain why Julie is wrong. It's a now let's be honest, guys. This question, preparing the kids for the real world. This question, girls especially, sales, preparing the kids for the real world. You betcha, right? I got to know if I want to walk up to that cash register and I'm going to have a huge credit card bill or not. Oh, I did have one more. Mean and central tendency. We'll just look at it really quickly. Here's an old one. Calculate the range for a set of data, 7th grade. Here's 7th grade. I have 2 sets of data now. I not only have to calculate one of these things, but based on the table and the data, which statement is true about the measure of central tendency that will provide the best comparison of the length of the jump ropes that were made by each team. Now look, I have to pick out which of those statements is actually true. Is it that the mean will provide the best comparison, the median, the range, or the mean and the median can't be used? Once again, you can see even in multiple choice, it's going to a really high level.
You should hear the debates in our office when we review and create questions together like this as a team. Well, what's best? What's the best answer? They come up with distractors. I mean, it takes us hours, but it's actually fun. But we're saying, well, 7th grade has to do this, you know, but that's where we're going.
So one last piece, and this is not as much about Common Core as it is about the state and the series of unknown things about the assessments right now. There's a lot we don't know. What do we know? We do know it's going to be based on Common Core standards. We do know that at some point they're going to be building to, if not the exact samples we saw there in PARCC, much more rigorous assessments for our kids. how do we build assessments and make sure that they're going to be valid for your kids? I just want to walk you through that process. I'm going to do it in about 2 seconds, and then if anybody has further questions about web analysis, I'd be happy to answer them with a WebEx individually. It's something I could spend hours talking about it. But each of our tests are based on, I'm going to skip that. I'll go back to that at the end. We do 4 things to our assessments to make sure that they are statistically valid and going to be good predictors for you. We used to use an exact blueprint of what the state did. So we used to say if the state had 54 questions, we'd have 54 questions. If the state said 30% was geometry, we'd say 30% was geometry. The state's no longer telling that anymore. And they're not releasing that as early as they used to. We'll always make corrections and adjustments, but we're using what the state is recommending, which is web analysis, for a statistically valid test to make sure that we're covering everything we need to cover with your kids to make sure that if we're saying that they mastered it, that they have mastered it. And if it's showing up as not mastered, you can be assured that's something that they still need to be working on. So first thing is categorical concurrence. And that basically says for every domain we have on our assessment, all the domains in math and the domains in reading that we're covering, you have to have at least 6 questions per. That's just the base level thing. You can't have less than 6 questions and have a statistically valid test. So every domain will have a minimum of 6 questions. That's an easy one to check off the list. From there, we go into depth of knowledge. So we look at, there's a ranking for all the Common Core standards on a level 1 to 4, saying if it's a level 1, it's very low rigor standard. If it's a level 4, it's a very high rigor standard. All of our test questions then go through an analysis to say what level is the question. Is the question a 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then it's compared back to the level of the standard. It needs to be at the standard or higher for it to make our test. Now, technically for web analysis, you can have some that are below and some that are above and some that are on, but as long as you balance out, you're okay. We make sure that all of our test questions are at the rigor level or higher. Range of knowledge looks at how many objectives are you testing? Are you testing a number of objectives under that domain? So just because I have 6 questions, I could ask 6 questions on the first performance objective, and then am I really telling you how your kids are doing in geometry? Probably not. So this looks at, are we covering enough of the performance indicators within that? And we do our best to cover every performance indicator that is accessible. There are a few. The last one in reading is the one that jumps out to me. It's the one that's read fluently through the grades. I'm not wording it right for Common Core, but obviously that's not one we can assess on a test, but any ones that we can, we do put on. And then our balance of representation looks at the number of items on the test per those performance indicators. So we can't have 6 questions on one performance indicator and 1 on another. So it looks at that balance, and it's all statistically calculated, and that's how we can assure that our tests are valid, that's how we got approved by the state. And I can tell you our tests come out to be higher rated on the web analysis than the state assessments have been in the past, and that any vendor that we've ever seen have, because we really build them from that working backwards to make sure that that's there. The last piece I want to leave you with is Marzano, who a couple of people talked about today, I think Marzano. He just recently did a study. He actually did a great webinar. I would recommend it. It's free on his website if you want to see it. But he went through and he did an analysis of classroom-based assessments. And he found that they have a reliability to standards of 0.45. That probably doesn't surprise many administrators in the room. It's not a very high reliability rating, but you know, teachers, sometimes we have those dinosaur units and we're teaching and we put that test question on even though maybe it didn't exactly match the standard. He looked at national and statewide assessments and they had a reliability of close to 0.75. Our tests, and this is in our RFQ if anybody wants to view it, have come out with a 0.82 to 0.91 reliability rating for the standards. So it's not a bragging thing. It's something I want our current clients to be able to see that so that when you get questions about the assessments, you'll know this. And you know I'll always field questions for you too, but I always like to arm our leaders with the information because these assessments will look a little bit different. They're going to be a little bit harder. And I think, you know, the great news about APBR is they're going to be seeing them very early on in the game, and they're going to be able to really evaluate and say, oh, this is what Common Core is going to mean for me, and this is how I'm going to have to make some adjustments and how I'm going to instruct this year. So that's basically it. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything. I know that was a lot fast. Either you're all in shock or you're like, great, thanks, Emily. Way to end.
All right. Thank you. All right. We have plenty of wrap. wants to peek the win. Throw that out right now. Who wants to pick something? Who feels lucky? Dom feels lucky. Okay, make somebody happy here. All right, 613-724. Oh, that sounds good. 724? No, 724. Dr. No, something. 613-784. Oh, there you go. You won, so pick another one.
Okay.
Everyone should win something. 720. 720. How about the closest to 720? 721? Does anyone have 719? You won. But she's looking to see out in the
She picks her own, it's right.
There you go.
737.
I trust you, really. All right, you get the picture.
Oh. 613-918.
918. 918.
Oh, that's me.
Oh! Big scissors. There we go.
I demand an audit.
All right, three in a row. I think we have to go on.
613-825.
825.
Oops, it's
825. There we go. No. Go ahead. You get two in a row.
780.
780. 780?
Oh, yeah, here it is.
All right. Is that Lois?
Yeah. Thanks.
You pick.
815.
815. 815. Closest to 815. 816? Do we have an 814? No, 816. How about that? All right, stay. 830. 830. And now we're up to the 25. 830. All right, closest to 830.
828.
Going once. Going twice. Your choice. Which one would you like?
This is tough. All right.
Grab both quickly.
Why don't you pick, Ellen? Go ahead.
710.
710. 710. Closest to 710.
706.
Oh.
711. I guess so. I see your 7 there. I raised you.
All right, now we're up to $50 gifts and $50. All right.
Oh, 709.
712.
712. Uh-oh.
I got 711.
712.
It's 709 and 708.
Too late. 712. Does she have 712? What's closest? What's it?
Well, I already won on 711, so I don't know.
Yes.
She has
The next
It'll be
closest.
scanned.
Yeah, 709 and 708.
All right, we're gonna
Spread the wealth.
We're gonna do this one. There you go.
Alright, thanks.
You're welcome.
699.
699.
Lois.
Lois is cleaning up. My goodness. All right, everyone's gonna go visit Riverhead. Last one. this is for $100.
Oh!
827.
I got it!
What do you plan on everybody's name? I'm just saying.
Just timing.
Just.
All right. Well, what a day we have had. A lot jam-packed into the day. We do that on purpose because we can't get you out every week. We'd love to meet with you for half a day every week and discuss and build, but we can't. But it doesn't stop here, the collaboration. Our goal, and it worked well last year, although we'd like to do more, is have quarterly meetings. And we could be hosted at one of our districts, or it could be here. We can continue this conversation online. We learn many ways through social media. We can continue this. We can also have our user groups, which we have through the BOCES. Please continue to contact us, work with us, our partners. We know how to do that. And our potential partners or people who are interested, come talk to us. Let's see if we can find solutions together and with our other partners. You don't have to work alone. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. We appreciate it. This is how we grow, and it's how you grow, and how we make better products to help the kids we serve. Have a great day, a great summer. You know how to contact us. Safe home. Thank you.